Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are not looking at, footnotes or some forgotten details.
Yeah.
We are confronting history's monoliths. These secrets carved so deeply into the very structure of the earth, the stone, and the fabric of time itself, that they actively defy every attempt we make to neatly catalog and understand them. These aren't just old buildings or artifacts, they are living questions that push the boundaries of science and, well, belief.
That's a powerful distinction. Our mission today is to engage with what we call intellectual friction. We have a stack of source materials detailing four of humanity's most enduring enigmas, and our goal is not to definitively solve them.
Right.
Instead, it's to synthesize why these mysteries persist.
Yeah.
What are the specific paradoxes, the impossible engineering, the contradictory data, the sudden disappearances that continue to captivate you, the learner, millennia later?
I appreciate that focus. We are seeking to understand the nature of the challenge itself. So, what are the four titans of history we're confronting today, spanning from the delicate to the colossal?
Well, we begin with the Shroud of Turin. It's the ultimate contradictory relic where the highest standards of modern science clash violently with photographic and anatomical evidence.
Okay.
We then shift continents to the Nazca Lines, an incomprehensible message written on the desert floor, designed, paradoxically, only to be read by unseen forces in the sky.
Moving to stone, we address Machu Picchu, the impossibly engineered city that was meticulously planned, swiftly built, and then suddenly vanished from memory without explanation.
And finally, the Great Wall of China, a monumental structure that was a strategic military failure, yet transformed into the defining, enduring symbol of imperial success and identity for one of the world's oldest civilizations.
Wow.
Let's unpack this by starting with the ultimate contradiction in cloth.
Let's begin where the theological meets the physical in the cold, climate-controlled environment of the Turin Cathedral in Italy. We are talking about the Shroud of Turin. This massive piece of cloth, it's 14 feet long, is woven from herringbone linen and bears this faint, sepia-toned image of a bearded man who appears to have suffered a violent crucifixion.
The physical description alone sets the stage for the mystery. But if it were just a faded cloth, we wouldn't be discussing it. What separates the shroud from any other alleged medieval relic is the impossible accuracy of the physical representation.
You're talking about the anatomical puzzle, the sheer improbability of the image's detail, especially if it were a creation of the Middle Ages.
Exactly. The image contains anatomical and forensic details that modern science only fully established centuries later. For example, the marks of flagellation, the whipping marks, they conform precisely to the use of a Roman flagrum. That's a specific type of whip with bone or metal pieces at the ends.
A detail a medieval artist might not know.
Precisely. And crucially, the bloodstains and serum marks show specific flow patterns consistent with the body moved from a vertical crucifixion position to a horizontal one for burial. You could literally see how gravity affected the blood flow in two different states.
So you can trace the sequence of events just from the stains.
You can. And then there are the wounds on the wrists, not the palms, which is the artistic convention of the time for crucifixions, and the specific consistent positioning of the thumb tucked inward. That's due to nerve damage caused by the wrist nails. It points to an understanding of crucifixion trauma that is just impossibly accurate for a 13th century artisan.
And the analysis of the image itself seems to violently reject the notion of a conventional painting.
It does, completely.
Yeah.
Microscopic and chemical analyses confirm there are no brushstrokes and, crucially, no pigments, the traditional signs of paint or dye on the cloth.
So it's not painted. What is it?
The image is formed by a surface discoloration, less than 200 nanometers deep. That's incredibly shallow. It affects only the very uppermost cellulose fibers of the linen. So whatever created this image, it was not painted in the traditional sense, but somehow imprinted or scorched onto the surface.
That lack of a traditional artistic medium, that leads us directly into the central scientific conflict, doesn't it? Where one piece of definitive evidence just contradicts another.
It's the heart of the paradox.
You have the incredible anatomical detail suggesting authenticity, and then you have the cold, hard science that screams medieval forgery.
That's the paradox that fuels the Quiet War. In 1988, we had the definitive scientific dating. 3 reputable laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona conducted radiocarbon dating tests.
The gold standard for dating organic material.
Exactly. The pooled result placed the cloth's origin between 1260 and 1390 AD. So if you trust carbon dating, the shroud is centuries too late to be Christ's burial cloth. It's a medieval artifact, period, case closed.
But the case wasn't closed, was it?
Not even close.
The dating evidence immediately ran into resistance, not just from theologians, but from analysts pointing to the sample itself. We have to address the contamination theory.
This is where the depth of the debate becomes clear. Critics of the 1988 findings argue that the sample taken was flawed. They suggest the sample was removed from a repair patch, an area known as the ray sample, where medieval nuns may have repaired fire damage from a past incident.
So they tested a patch, not the original cloth.
That's the argument, and it gets more complex. Microbiologists have also argued that heavy biological contamination, I'm talking about centuries of bacterial cellulose, candle soot, chemical residues, could skew the radiocarbon results, making an ancient cloth appear much younger.
So it's a debate about sample integrity versus the reliability of the dating technique itself.
It is a highly reliable scientific technique that might have been applied to a highly unreliable sample. It's a stalemate. And decades before that, we had the key event that fundamentally redefined the mystery, the discovery of the photographic negative effect.
This is the shocking moment of 1898.
Yes, Secondo Pia, an Italian lawyer and amateur photographer, was granted permission to photograph the shroud. He was expecting a simple, visible image. But when he developed his negative plates, he saw a phenomenon that should have been impossible. The faint sepia image on the cloth was itself a photographic negative.
So when he created a negative of a negative,
He got a positive. The negative plates reversed the tones, revealing a stunningly clear, proportional positive image of a man. The detail was incredible.
and that single detail is monumentally disruptive to the 13th century dating. It means the creator, whether an artist or some physical process, understood the reversal of light and shadow needed to create a recognizable, proportional human image.
A concept that only became technologically possible with the invention of photography in the 19th century.
It's completely anachronistic.
Exactly. The sophistication suggests a leap in optical or chemical knowledge utterly misplaced in that historical period. It forced analysts to ask, how can an object dated to the Middle Ages behave like a highly sophisticated photographic plate?
And the physics gets even stranger when we consider the three-dimensional encoding.
This is where the evidence truly snaps. The image isn't just a 2D photograph. It holds depth information.
What do you mean by that? How can a 2D image have 3D information?
Studies conducted using advanced image processing tools, like the VP8 Image Analyzer, which is a NASA-derived tool originally used for analyzing satellite imagery, revealed something astounding.
Okay.
The intensity of the CP coloring on the linen correlates precisely and proportionally with the distance of the body from the cloth.
Wait a minute. So parts of the body that would have been closer to the cloth, like the nose, are darker, and parts further away, like the cheeks, are lighter?
Precisely. It encodes three-dimensional information. If you feed that intensity map into a computer, you can reconstruct a rough 3D model of the man. It's not just shading for artistic effect, it's a distance map.
If an artist were painting, pressure or pigment density would create the shading. But a photograph, or whatever this is essentially mapping light exposure to create shading. For that shading to exactly correlate to the distance of the body from the cloth, it implies the body was the source of some kind of energy or influence that imprinted the image based on proximity.
That is the unsolved problem. How could a 3D effect, relying on a principle we call distance mapping, have been created without modern technology? This complexity forces the theories to spiral into highly speculative realms because the available evidence is so contradictory.
Let's break down the three main competing interpretations. If we trust the 1988 dating, the first theory is, well, the medieval genius.
Right. This theory requires us to hypothesize a Leonardo da Vinci-type genius, but operating centuries before Da Vinci, who somehow created a perfect photographic negative, complete with 3D encoding, perfect forensic anatomical knowledge, and all without leaving visible pigments or brushstrokes.
It seems unlikely.
It's the highest compliment you can pay to a medieval forger, suggesting they mastered techniques centuries ahead of their time. It's almost as miraculous as the alternative.
Then you have the more naturalistic theory, which attempts to explain the lack of pigment and the surface image as a kind of chemical accident.
This is the vaporography theory. It suggests the image was created by a natural chemical reaction over centuries, maybe involving volatile chemical compounds or vapors released by burial spices, essential oils, or linen degradation processes.
So the body itself released fumes that stain the cloth.
In essence, yes. The chemical vapors rising off the body react with the linen fibers, causing the observed surface discoloration. This accounts for the lack of pigment and the shallow nature of the image.
But does it account for the detail?
It struggles immensely to explain the anatomical accuracy, the complex blood flow patterns, and especially that precise 3D encoding. It's a plausible chemical mechanism without a plausible result.
And finally, the theory that accounts for all the impossible elements, the one that requires a complete leap of faith beyond traditional science.
The most dramatic and scientifically challenging theory, that the image was formed by a flash of focused energy or radiation at the exact moment of resurrection.
A literal scorch mark from a divine event.
This scorching event would explain the instantaneous superficial nature of the image, the lack of directional shadows, the precise anatomical details as it was formed by the body itself, and the 3D encoding correlating with the radiation intensity.
It fits the data.
It fits the physical paradoxes most concisely, but it moves the discussion entirely outside the realm of observable, repeatable science.
The cultural perspective and persistence are fascinating here. The Vatican, holding the relic, knows that taking a definitive side would collapse the mystery, so they maintain that careful neutrality.
Precisely. They refer to it only as an icon for reflection, respecting the belief of millions while acknowledging the scientific conflicts. This careful political and theological positioning is critical.
So the mystery is self-sustaining.
It is. The shroud persists because it operates on a razor's edge. Every discovery confirming its physical uniqueness simultaneously deepens the contradiction of its carbon date. It forces you, the learner, to choose which evidence you find most compelling, the science of the date or the physics of the image.
A truly masterful contradiction in cloth. Okay, let's leave the cold, controlled atmosphere of Turin and move thousands of miles to the blistering heat of the Peruvian desert, where we find messages designed only for the sky. The Nazca Lines.
We shift now from a 14-foot cloth to 190 square miles of incomprehensible drawing. The Nazca Lines are etched into the rust-colored earth of the Peruvian desert, a vast gallery created by the ancient Nazca people between 500 BCE and 500 CE.
And the creation method itself is so simple, which makes the result all the more astonishing. It's not complex carving, it's an exercise in contrast.
That's key to their preservation. They are technically geoglyphs, created by simply moving the reddish iron oxide-rich surface pebbles, which form what's called a desert varnish.
Like a natural pavement.
Exactly. They just move that aside to reveal the lighter, yellowish clay earth underneath. Because the area receives almost no rain and the heat creates a cushion of air that prevents erosion, these shallow etchings have remained visible for over 1,500 years.
The scale and subject matter are truly mind-boggling. We're talking about colossal geometric and zoomorphic designs, animals that stretch for hundreds of feet.
We see famous figures like the giant hummingbird with a 300-foot wingspan, and the monkey, the spider, the condor. But alongside these complex zoomorphic figures are immense geometric shapes, trapezoids, triangles, and most puzzlingly, perfectly straight lines that stretch for miles.
Miles.
Yes, for miles, running without deviation across multiple hills and valleys.
And here is the truly chilling question that defines the entire enigma, the aerial perspective problem. The Nazca had no known means of flight, nor did they have skyscrapers. Why create art designed exclusively for an aerial audience?
That is the core paradox. They were designing for an audience, whether divine or celestial, that they could not physically join. This suggests the process of creation, or the intended recipient of the message, was far more important than the ground-level viewing experience.
So it's not art for art's sake.
It moves the art from aesthetic pleasure to ritual communication.
But let's talk practicalities. This must have been a mind-boggling engineering puzzle. How did they achieve that geometric perfection, those straight lines that run for kilometers, without the ability to step back and look at the whole picture?
They were mastering geometry on a continental scale, using techniques we still find difficult to replicate without modern technology. Archaeologists believe they employed sophisticated surveying techniques involving small-scale models, ropes, stakes, and observation points on nearby hilltops.
So they would create a small version first and then scale it up.
That's the leading theory. To maintain a perfectly straight line over uneven terrain, they must have used a system of proportional scaling and sighting posts. You'd have two posts, line them up, and then have someone walk out with the third post and line it up with the first two, and you just repeat that process for miles.
Wait, if the line crosses a dip or a small ridge, you need to ensure the point on the other side of the ridge maintains the trajectory established on the first side. This requires advanced knowledge of geometry and potentially even trigonometry, right?
Precisely. It required a consistent angle and methodology. The fact that many of these kilometers-long lines deviate by less than a few feet, even on irregular gradients, speaks to an organizational capacity and technical knowledge that belies the historical absence of complex tools or written engineering manuals.
So we have the how and advanced, unwritten knowledge of practical geometry, but we still haven't solved the why. If they weren't meant to be looked at from the ground, what were they for? Let's compare the prevailing theories, starting with the functional roles.
The interpretations generally fall into three realms: the astronomical, the hydrological, so ritual and resource related, and the speculative. The astronomical theory, popularized by researchers like Maria Reiche, suggests that geoglyphs functioned as an enormous astronomical calendar.
A calendar in the sand.
Yes, certain lines and figures point definitively to celestial events, such as the position of the sun during solstices or the rising of key constellations. This would have been crucial for timing agricultural cycles in a very harsh environment.
But why use complex animal figures for astronomy? Wouldn't a simple line pointing to the star be enough? That seems like an immense waste of effort if the goal was just utilitarian.
That's the critical challenge to the purely astronomical view. And this is where we blend function with ritual. Researchers have found that specific animal geoglyphs correlate with specific celestial phenomena or needs. For instance, the monkey figure is sometimes linked to the Pleiades or Ursa Major and may have held specific significance regarding the onset of the wet season.
So the animal is a symbol for the celestial event.
Exactly. The spider, which is associated with rain gods and other Andean cultures, might have been part of an elaborate communication intended to influence weather patterns.
Which brings us directly to the ritual/resource theory, the one that connects the lines to the desert's most precious resource, water.
This is highly plausible in this hyper-arid environment. Researchers studying the geography noted that many trapezoids and lines align not with the stars, but with underground water sources or puquios and ancient ceremonial sites.
So they were mapping water.
Or walking to it. The lines could have been processional paths leading to water, or perhaps sacred roadways where elaborate ceremonies, dances, offerings, petitions were conducted, intended to honor the deities that controlled the essential life-giving element of rain. The trapezoids, in particular, often occur near drainage systems and may have been ritual reservoirs or gathering places.
And we can't ignore the theory that, however dismissed by archaeologists, captured the pop culture imagination in the 1960s.
We must briefly acknowledge Eric von Daniken's controversial suggestion that these were landing strips for ancient aliens, popularized in Chariots of the Gods.
Right, the ancient astronaut theory.
It is overwhelmingly considered pseudoscience by the archaeological community because it fundamentally ignores the clear evidence of the Nazca's engineering capabilities and the complex religious context.
But it's a persistent theory.
It is. And the persistence of the ancient astronaut theory illustrates a psychological truth. When humanity encounters technical sophistication that seems to transcend known historical limits, the default explanation for many is extraterrestrial involvement. The mystery is so powerful, it invites grand, often fantastical, speculation.
But the mystery is literally growing, isn't it? Modern technology is proving that we haven't even cataloged the entire message yet.
Correct. Current investigations utilizing modern tools like drones and artificial intelligence are revolutionizing our understanding. AI can scan vast tracts of the desert far more efficiently than humans on foot. Recent research has revealed over 140 new geoglyphs.
140 new ones.
And crucially, many of the newer findings, including figures of humanoid figures, distinct cats, and smaller earlier works, often appear on hill slopes. This demonstrates a different style and potentially serving a different purpose, perhaps viewed by local communities rather than just the sky.
The fact that they were constantly adding to this library of sky messages and we're still finding new ones means we still don't have the complete message. It's an ongoing conversation between the Earth and the unknown.
It's the ultimate example of a mystery defined by its required perspective. We cannot fully understand it until we either gain the perspective of the intended audience, the gods or the sky, or fully decipher the complex geometrical and ritual vocabulary they employed on the ground. The desert is slowly exhaling this library of questions, one figure at a time.
Moving now from the desert floor to the towering peaks, let's shift our attention to a city built so impossibly high it was forgotten by history, only to reappear as one of the world's greatest architectural feats, Machu Picchu.
High in the Peruvian Andes, nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, Machu Picchu is an astonishing testament to human persistence. This massive stone city clings to a mountain ridge, seemingly defying gravity, built around 1450 by the great Inca Emperor Pachacuti.
The history of Machu Picchu is defined less by its construction and more by its singular, dramatic disappearance from human memory during the height of Spanish conquest.
That is the critical historical context. The city was strategically placed, hidden among steep slopes and thick vegetation. When American historian Hiram Bingham stumbled upon it in 1911, it wasn't a minor archaeological find. It was a rediscovery of a magnificent urban center so completely forgotten that the Spanish conquerors, despite meticulous record-keeping of the gold they pillaged and the cities they destroyed, had zero records of Machu Picchu's existence.
It was just gone.
The mist and the mountain literally swallowed it whole.
The mystery immediately deepens when we examine its brief period of operation. It was a spectacular city, but it was occupied for barely a century.
The abandonment is baffling to modern historians. The city was designed to house around 750 residents, largely priests, nobles, and attendants. Yet it was emptied relatively peacefully around 1532, just as the Spanish began their conquest. Crucially, yes, there are no signs of battle, no fire damage, no mass graves. Its residents didn't flee a siege or a massacre. They simply organized, gathered their most valuable possessions, and quietly left.
So why walk away from such an immense undertaking? Was it political, environmental, or medical?
Historians entertain several subplots to explain this organized departure. One theory suggests the residents succumbed to a virulent smallpox epidemic, a disease introduced by the Europeans that often travel ahead of the conquerors themselves.
So they just left before it wiped everyone out.
A city decimated by disease would have organized a swift, final evacuation. Another theory posits a strategic political decision. Emperor Pachacuti's descendants, facing the collapse of the empire, may have deemed the city's remote location too difficult to defend or supply, and ordered the residents to integrate into safer Inca holdouts. The lack of struggle points to an intentional, mournful rather than desperate exodus.
Regardless of the reason they left, we are left with the impossible engineering feat they created. They achieved this without any of the tools we consider fundamental to construction.
It truly stretches the limits of our understanding of ancient engineering. Remember the constraints. The Inca had no iron tools, no wheels for transport, and no written language to pass down complex building codes.
So how did they build it?
They managed to quarry and transport massive granite blocks, some weighing over 50 tons, up a steep mountain ridge, navigating precarious slopes and deep valleys.
The puzzle is the precision of the stonework, the lack of mortar, and its resilience to constant seismic activity.
This is the genius of Inca construction, ashlar masonry. The stones fit together without a single bit of mortar so precisely that the famous quote holds true. Not even a knife blade can slip between them. This wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional.
Let's elaborate on ashlar masonry for the learner. How does fitting stones perfectly without mortar make a city more stable, especially in an earthquake zone?
Think of it like a giant, meticulously constructed 3D jigsaw puzzle. The key is the shape. The stones are often irregularly shaped, with concave and convex angles that interlock. When a severe earthquake hits, the lack of rigid mortar allows the stones to slightly shift, move, and then settle back into place.
They can dance with the earthquake.
That's a great way to put it. The interlocking joints prevent them from tumbling apart. If they had used mortar, the rigid structure would have cracked and crumbled immediately under the constant stress of the Andes seismic activity. They achieved structural flexibility through precision.
How did they achieve that precision without diamond-tip saws or laser levels?
They possessed a profound understanding of geology and, well, patience. A lot of patience. They shaped the granite primarily by understanding its natural fracture points, using heavy bronze chisels to roughly cut the blocks, and then relied heavily on hammering stones like dolerite or other hardened rock to pound and grind the surfaces.
So it was just brute force and incredible attention to detail.
Meticulous brute force. The final fit was achieved by the process of repeatedly lifting, grinding, and fitting each stone against its neighbor until the contact was absolute. The incredible amount of time required for this process suggests that high-quality, precise construction was a cultural priority, perhaps a religious offering in itself.
So why go to all that immense trouble, high up in the clouds, often using more labor than necessary just for simple construction? This leads us back to the theories on its ultimate purpose.
The purpose is likely multi-layered. One leading theory is that it was a secluded royal estate, a place of rest and spiritual rejuvenation for Emperor Pachacuti and his extended family, a sort of private, sacred resort. The quality of the construction and the presence of dedicated bathing areas and storage facilities support this.
But the architecture itself screams of celestial observation.
Absolutely. Many structures point toward its use as a sophisticated astronomical observatory. The city is positioned to maximize observations of the rising and setting sun and key stars. The famous Intihuatana stone, nicknamed the hitching post of the sun, is perhaps the best evidence.
What exactly does the Intihuatana stone do?
The name itself references Inti, the sun god. It's a finely carved granite pillar whose angles and corners align perfectly with the four cardinal directions. Crucially, during the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the sun casts no shadow from the Intihuatana stone at noon.
No shadow at all.
None. This pinpoint accuracy allowed the Inca to hitch the sun in place, marking the vital turning point of the year and ensuring the continuity of their religious festivals and agricultural calendar.
And finally, the theory suggesting it was a sacred refuge reserved for the spiritual elite.
This theory proposes it was a sacred refuge reserved specifically for the Inca's most powerful priests and the virgins of the sun, women dedicated entirely to Inti. This would explain its secluded, hard-to-reach location, making it a perfect spiritual sanctuary, and the lack of military fortifications or extensive civilian housing. It was a place for ritual, contemplation, and communication with the gods.
The persistence of Machu Picchu is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. It didn't just survive the elements, it survived history itself.
It is the ultimate survival story. Unlike other, more accessible Inca cities like Cusco, which were quickly plundered and destroyed for their materials, Machu Picchu sat untouched for 4 centuries.
Just hidden.
The combination of the jungle canopy reclaiming the site and the sheer verticality of the mountains acted as a perfect camouflage. This led to the powerful cultural legend that the mountain itself had hidden it from the invaders, protecting this dwelling place of the gods. Its survival ensures the mystery persists today, a physical link to a vanished empire.
That's a phenomenal journey from a hidden city to a structure that was simply too big to hide. We now move to our final enigma, a monument that involved more human effort than perhaps any other, yet was also a spectacular military failure, the Great Wall of China.
This is the paradox of scale and utility. We're talking about the Great Wall, a continuous, often fragmented system of fortifications snaking across roughly 13,000 miles of varied terrain.
And we have to debunk this right away. It's not visible from space with the naked eye, right?
Right. We must firmly debunk that enduring myth. But its scale still demands we treat it as an infrastructure project unparalleled in human history.
We primarily focus on the sections built during the Ming Dynasty, correct?
Yes. Construction began as early as the 7th century BCE, utilizing existing sections of earth ramparts and stone. But the massive, interlocking brick and stone wall we recognize today, with its distinctive watchtowers and battlements, was overwhelmingly the work of the Ming Dynasty, built between 1368 and 1644 CE.
And why then?
Primarily to fend off renewed incursions from northern nomadic groups like the Mongols.
The human cost of this endeavor is almost impossible to comprehend. The scale of the labor alone justifies the wall's grim nickname.
The construction was utterly brutal. Historians estimate that over 400,000 laborers, soldiers, peasants, and criminals died during its construction and maintenance over the centuries. This grim reality gave rise to its morbid nickname, the longest cemetery on Earth.
And there's that legend about the workers' bodies.
Yes. Ancient legends even claimed that workers' bodies were mixed with the mortar and rammed earth. A gruesome yet illustrative analogy for the immense personal sacrifice poured into the stone.
So we have this gigantic, deadly, monumental military undertaking designed for one primary purpose: comprehensive defense against northern invaders. And here is the core intrigue. It repeatedly failed to achieve that primary military objective.
This is the central historical paradox we must confront. Why build 13,000 miles of wall if history shows it was repeatedly breached? If you measure the wall purely by its military effectiveness as a sealed barrier, it was an immense failure.
So the Mongols just went around it.
The Mongols, during their rise, simply bypassed sections or, more successfully, exploited existing weaknesses.
But the most famous failure wasn't technological, it was entirely human. The wall was conquered not by battering rams, but by bribery.
Precisely. The famous quote, often attributed to Genghis Khan, "The strength of a wall depends on the courage of those who defend it," proved literally true. The greatest breach came in 1644, when the Manchu forces, aided by a Ming general desperate to suppress a peasant revolt, successfully bribed the guard at the crucial Shanhai Pass.
They just opened the gates.
First pass under heaven. They just opened the gates. The wall did not fall. It was betrayed. So if it was such a costly failure as a defensive barrier, Why did construction continue for centuries, consuming immense imperial resources?
This suggests the wall was never purely a fortification. Recent archaeological investigations have pushed historians to view the wall as an enormous multifunctional infrastructure project serving alternative, perhaps more enduring purposes.
We need to see the Great Wall not as a static line of defense, but as a dynamic system of communication, control, and logistics. First and most critically, it was a practical highway.
A highway.
The top of the wall provided a wide, engineered platform for the swift movement of massive numbers of troops and vital supplies, grain, weapons, artillery, across vast distances of otherwise impassable, rough terrain. This was exponentially more efficient than moving supplies across the open wilderness.
It also served a powerful symbolic and administrative function that might have mattered more to the emperors than its tactical utility.
Undeniably, the wall became the ultimate symbol of imperial reach, the physical delineation between the Han civilization and the northern barbarians.
A line in the sand, but made of stone.
Exactly. Some sections were built in seemingly impossible places, crossing steep, impassable mountains or vast, barren deserts, where no realistic military attack was expected. These stretches weren't practical fortifications. They were symbolic markers, asserting the empire's absolute territorial control and defining the physical limits of Chinese identity.
And it was a tool for internal governance and economic control, a border control system designed to manage commerce.
Crucially, yes. The wall, with its numerous official gates and checkpoints, became a sophisticated tool for regulating and taxing trade along the massive Silk Road. It allowed the centralized government to control who and what came in and out. This control included regulating immigration, suppressing smuggling, and monitoring the movement of potentially rebellious or disruptive groups, ensuring internal security and maximizing imperial revenue.
What's particularly fascinating is that while the defensive function failed, the communication system built into the wall was an unprecedented success, ancient broadband communication, if you will.
That logistical detail is key. The tens of thousands of watchtowers built along the wall were not just guard posts. They doubled as highly efficient signal stations. They were engineered to transmit messages at astonishing speed using standardized signals. Smoke or colored flags during the day and fire at night.
How fast was this ancient signal network?
Historically, messengers on horseback carrying vital information could only cover perhaps 30 miles a day. Through this integrated signal system, coordinated messages, such as reports of troop movements or imminent invasions, could travel across hundreds of miles, reportedly up to 450 miles, in mere hours.
That's a game changer.
This ability to rapidly coordinate the defense of vast frontier zones was perhaps the wall's most successful military contribution.
We also have those wonderful cultural legends tied to the foundation, specifically the story of finding dragon bones during construction.
These cultural legends provide a spectacular bridge between mythology and forgotten history. Ancient Chinese texts describe workers finding immense bones, which were subsequently incorporated into the wall or treated as sacred artifacts, the dragon bones.
And we think we know what those were now.
Modern paleontologists now believe these accounts refer to the discovery and documentation of large dinosaur fossils. This suggests that the Chinese people encountered and documented paleontological evidence centuries before Western science developed its systematic understanding of prehistoric life. It's a spectacular convergence where the foundation of an empire literally met the bones of ancient legendary creatures.
So the wall persists today even as it crumbles and is reclaimed by vegetation. It endures not because it was a perfect structure, but because of the massive conflicting meaning it holds.
It embodies a profound philosophical truth. The standoff between the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. The wall was built to be the immovable object, attempting to freeze a constantly shifting geopolitical border. But the relentless forces of human migration, weather, and the sheer cost of imperial governance proved unstoppable.
So its meaning shifted.
In its failure as a barrier and its success as a symbol, it remains a potent analogy for the complex, often contradictory nature of history itself.
That brings us full circle. If we synthesize the thread connecting these four distinct mysteries, the Shroud, Nazca, Machu Picchu, and the Great Wall, what is the ultimate takeaway for the learner?
The thread connecting them is the refusal to be neatly cataloged and understood, despite millennia of scrutiny. We have the Shroud's impossible precision contradicting its reliable dating. We have the Nazca Lines' incomprehensible perspective demanding a celestial audience. We have Machu Picchu's sudden vanishing act, coupled with its impossible, seismically resilient engineering. And the Great Wall's purposeful military failure redefined as administrative and symbolic success.
They all force us to confront our own limits.
Exactly. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and acknowledge the sophisticated, often unrecorded genius of past civilizations.
It reminds us that the most significant achievements of the past are not the answers they provide, but the profound sense of wonder they refuse to surrender. They are actively asking questions of us, the descendants.
And this intellectual friction is vital. These deep dives are valuable because they show us that historical truths are often complex, contradictory, and stubbornly incomplete.
So I have to challenge you, the listener, directly. Which of these paradoxes is the most compelling? Is it the precise physics of the shroud that demands a supernatural explanation, or the precise geometry of the Nazca Lines that points to a forgotten science of the Earth? And perhaps more importantly, look around at the major projects being undertaken today, our deep-sea cables, our space launches, our immense data centers. What grand contradictory questions are we building today that will similarly baffle and intrigue future generations centuries from now?